Has your doctor told you that you need a hysterectomy? Or are you thinking yourself that you might need a hysterectomy because your menstrual cycles are horrible? Well, I'm here to talk to you about hysterectomies. I am Selena Faye, your midlife guru, coach, best friend, whatever you want to call me. I'm here to talk all things midlife, and today I'm talking about hysterectomies. Why you might have to have a hysterectomy and the types of hysterectomies that there are. So when my doctor told me that I needed a hysterectomy, I mean, I'm a nurse. I've heard of hysterectomies. I've known plenty of people that have had hysterectomies, and I thought for a while that I needed one. 10 years ago, I had my tubes tied, and after I had my tubes tied, I started having horrible menstruals. I'm talking about extremely painful, major cramping. I should have took stock in Midol because I was taking that like freaking candy. Shooting pains down my legs. I couldn't stand for a long time or my legs would give out on me. My periods got shorter and shorter, and they became, all I was doing was passing blood clots. I'm talking about big, huge blood clots. And you try getting this big old thing through something smaller than my finger. I mean, it was so painful. And then when the clot would pass, it was just gushing blood. I'd always been a person that wore tampons. I couldn't wear tampons anymore. I had to wear menstrual pads all the time, and almost like a freaking diaper, because I never knew when that blood clot was going to come through and just gush blood everywhere. I mean, it was horrible. And the more it went on, the worse and worse it got over time. And the more tired I was, the more fatigued I was. I could literally drink a soda and lay down and take a 3-hour nap. I was that exhausted. And it just got worse and worse and worse. Well, even being a nurse, I'm a hospice nurse. I don't do OB womenly things. So I had always heard you have a hysterectomy if you have cancer or if you have heavy bleeding. I was passing blood clots. I didn't associate that with being heavy bleeding. So I just sucked it up. Plus, I knew I couldn't take time off work long enough to recover from a hysterectomy, which is usually about 6 weeks. So it really wasn't an option, so I didn't see the point in telling my doctor about it. Well, finally, I'm in a point in my life where I can take the time off of work. I did have the insurance to help me out with it and short-term disability, so I got a little bit of a paycheck while I'm out of work. So I mentioned it to my doctor, and her first thing was like, oh yeah, we need to get you to a OBGYN and get you scheduled for whatever can be done. So I went to the OBGYN, wonderful, wonderful woman, and we were talking about my options, and she mentioned a uterine ablation, which I did not know what that was. And so she explained it to me that inside your uterus, there is a lining, and that lining grows when your body is preparing itself to have a baby. And when you don't get pregnant, that lining is what you bleed out, essentially. There's more technical stuff to it, but I'm trying to make it very simple here. That's what you bleed out. Well, over time, that lining gets thicker and thicker and thicker. It doesn't all bleed away, and then that can cause the heavy bleeding because it's not getting rid of it the way that your body normally would. And so the uterine ablation, they can go in there and they can literally go through the vagina and they just burn all that lining, so they take it away. Then you don't have a period. Now, over time, that lining does grow back and you could possibly have a period again. I'm like, let me do that, because that's a day procedure. You're in, you're out, recovery's a day or two, and then you can go back to regular life. I'm like, heck yeah, sign me up for that. That is definitely what I want to do. In preparation for that, they take blood work and they do a sonogram. I had fibroids and I had cysts. The uterine ablation was not an option for me. And taking the lining away would not necessarily take away the extreme pain that I was feeling in my menstrual cycles. And that was one of the biggest things I wanted to alleviate, was the pain. So hysterectomy is what I did. Now, here are some other reasons that you may need a hysterectomy besides heavy bleeding, passing blood clots, extremely painful periods, constant bleeding, fibroids, cysts, cancer, endometriosis. Those are usually the biggest reasons that someone needs a hysterectomy. Now, when it comes to a hysterectomy, it is usually a day procedure done in outpatient. You go in that morning. The surgery can last 1 to 3 hours typically. Then you go into recovery. Once you're able to pee, they send you home. That is typically what happens. Now, there are reasons that you may have to stay in the hospital overnight, or those time frames may last a little bit longer. But generally, that's how it's done. It is also usually done laparoscopic if possible with a robot. The doctor is controlling it, but it's robotic technology that is used, and that's usually 4 little incisions in your abdomen where they put in a camera, they put in the gas that blows your belly up, the instruments to cut and stuff, and then if your uterus is small enough, they can pull it out one of those incision sites. Now, if your uterus is too large or there's more complications, then they will take it out through your vagina. I had my uterus, my fallopian tubes, and my ovaries taken out. Taking your ovaries out immediately puts you into menopause. That does not happen for everyone. Some hysterectomies can mean just taking out the uterus. Commonly now, lately, they're taking out fallopian tubes only. It may include ovaries, it may not. It may include the cervix, it may not. You do want to find out if they take out your cervix, because if they do, then you no longer need pap smears, because the pap smears are checking your cervix. You will still continue to need vaginal exams every few years to make sure you're not getting cancer in your vaginal area. But if they take all those other things out, you don't have to worry about getting cancer in those areas. So that is a positive in the whole situation. Now, sometimes they cannot do it laparoscopic and they have to completely cut you open with the big incision in your abdomen. And then usually they take your uterus and whatever else they're taking out at that time through that incision and they sew you up, and you're good to go. If you've had C-sections before, a lot of times they just go through that scar where you had your C-section before. I had not had any C-sections, so that wasn't an option for me. A lot of people who have had C-sections say the recovery from a hysterectomy is so much easier than recovery from C-section. Some people say that they have extreme pain for a long period of time, and some people have told me that they were back to work 2 days after a hysterectomy. My doctor doesn't recommend that. I don't recommend that because you have to be able to heal. And one of the things you have to heal is not just your incision site, but it's down where your vagina and bladder are, because they take your uterus out, it leaves this opening that your intestines slowly just kind of reposition themselves. And it's not a big opening. I mean, it's small when you're actually looking at it. But because they take your uterus out, the doctor has to stitch up what's called your vaginal cuff and your bladder so that it doesn't fall down into that. When they stitch that up, that has to heal. That vaginal cuff has to heal before you can be released to do things. So that is usually 6 to 8 weeks. A lot of that depends on how your body heals and also what types of job you have as to when you go back to work. I do a physically laboring job, so I definitely have to have my vaginal cuff completely healed in order to go back to work. But my doctor did say that if you someone that has a desk job, then you may be able to go back to work after 2 to 3 weeks if all you're doing is sitting at your desk. So after you have your hysterectomy, you need to have somebody with you for at least about a week so that they can, another adult that can help you, moving around and also getting things that you need. You are not supposed to lift anything heavier than a gallon of milk. Do some women have to do that? Yes. Sometimes we have to do whatever life entails. But if you are able to rest, I highly, highly suggest it and take it easy. The first 2 weeks, I don't do well under general anesthesia, so I was super, super sleepy, and that is also very common in just how the body heals, it sleeps. So for the first 2 weeks, I slept quite a bit, but then I'm getting energy back, but still having to remember to take it slow. Those are some reasons that you could have to have a hysterectomy, the ways they may do your hysterectomy, and kind of what to expect a little bit after. Go check out my other hysterectomy videos that give you more details on all things hysterectomy. And until next time, love yourself and take care of yourself.